Before I tell you what happened at that cabin, I need you to understand something. I never believed in monsters. Not ghosts, not demons, not creatures hiding in the woods. But after 1 week alone near Black Pine Lake, I stopped sleeping with my bedroom door open because some nights I still hear knocking outside my room. 3 slow knocks, and every time I hear them, I remember what was waiting for me in that cabin. It happened in October of 2022. I'm telling this story because I still can't sleep through the night anymore. I've tried therapy. I've tried medication. I even moved to a different state, hoping distance would somehow erase what happened. It didn't. There are some things your brain refuses to let go of. For me, it's the sound of footsteps circling a cabin at 3 in the morning. And the worst part? I still don't know what was out there. Back then, I was 26 years old and working remotely as a graphic designer in Portland, Oregon. My life had completely fallen apart in a span of a few months. My girlfriend left me, my father passed away unexpectedly, and my anxiety was getting so bad that I could barely focus on work. So when my coworker Evan suggested I take a week away from the city, I actually listened. He told me his uncle owned an old hunting cabin deep in northern Washington near a place called Black Pine Lake. No neighbors, no cell service, no traffic, just forest. At the time, that sounded perfect. I wanted silence. I got it. But I learned very quickly that silence in the woods is never truly silence. Sometimes it means something is listening. I drove up there on a Thursday afternoon. The further north I went, the more isolated everything became. Gas stations disappeared. Houses became rare. Eventually, I was driving through endless stretches of dark pine forest with fog hanging low across the road. I remember seeing a faded wooden sign that read, Black Pine Lake, 17 miles. The road after that was almost completely dirt. My GPS lost signal. The sky turned gray. And for the first time during the drive, I got this strange feeling in my stomach. Like I shouldn't keep going. But I ignored it. Around sunset, I finally reached the cabin. It sat alone near the edge of the lake, surrounded by thick trees. The structure looked older than I expected. Dark wood, rusted chimney, a sagging porch. It honestly looked like the kind of place you'd see in a horror movie. But despite that, I liked it immediately. The lake behind it was calm and perfectly still. No lights anywhere. No sounds except wind moving through the trees. Evan had left a key under a flower pot. Inside, the cabin smelled like old wood and dust. There was a fireplace, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a radio sitting on a shelf. No internet, no television. Exactly what I wanted. At least that's what I thought. The first night was normal. I cooked canned soup, drank a couple beers, and sat on the porch listening to the forest. It actually felt peaceful. But around midnight, something woke me up. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I heard it again. A knock. 3 slow knocks. Thunk, 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 coming from outside. I sat up in bed, confused. Another knock followed, this time from the side wall of the cabin. I checked my phone out of habit. No signal. The cabin was completely dark except for moonlight coming through the curtains. I remember staring toward the bedroom doorway while my heart started beating faster. Then everything went quiet, completely quiet. No wind, no insects, nothing. That silence lasted almost a full minute. Then I heard footsteps, slow footsteps outside. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Something was walking around the cabin. At first I assumed it was an animal, maybe a deer, but the footsteps sounded deliberate, human. I got out of bed and grabbed the flashlight I brought with me. The footsteps stopped the moment I stood up. That was the first thing that really scared me. It felt aware of me. I slowly moved toward the living room and looked through the front window. Nothing, just darkness and trees. I swept the flashlight across the porch. Empty. Then I noticed something near the steps. Footprints. Mud footprints. Human footprints. Fresh. I froze, because those prints hadn't been there earlier, and they didn't lead away from the cabin. They stopped halfway across the porch, like whoever made them had vanished. I barely slept the rest of the night. The next morning, I convinced myself I was overreacting. There were probably hunters nearby. Maybe someone wandered onto the property. Still, the footprints bothered me, especially because they were barefoot. That detail made my skin crawl. I spent most of Friday trying to relax. I walked around the lake. I read a book. I even took photos of the scenery. But something about the woods felt wrong. The deeper I walked into the forest, the more uncomfortable I became. It was hard to explain. The woods were too quiet, and several times I got the distinct feeling that someone was watching me. At one point, I found an old deer carcass hanging from a tree. Not by ropes, by rusted wire. Its stomach had been cut open. The body looked fresh. I immediately turned around and headed back toward the cabin. That night, things got worse. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the radio. Static. I stumbled into the living room. The radio was on. I knew for a fact I hadn't turned it on. The static crackled loudly through the cabin. Then, through the noise, I heard a voice. A man's voice. Very faint. Hello. I rushed over and adjusted the dial. The signal cleared for a second. Then the voice returned. Don't let him inside. Static exploded through the speaker. I jerked backward. Then another voice came through. A different voice. Lower. He sees you. The radio died completely. Silence again. That's when I heard footsteps on the roof. Heavy footsteps, walking slowly above me. I can still remember how impossible that sounded. The cabin roof was steep and old. No normal person could walk across it that slowly without slipping. Yet the footsteps continued, one side of the roof to the other, back and forth, back and forth. I grabbed the fireplace poker and just stood there listening. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave. But it was pitch black outside, and I had to drive nearly 20 miles through forest roads to reach the highway. So instead, I locked every door. Then the footsteps stopped. For a few seconds, everything became still again. Then came the scratching, long scraping sounds against the walls, like fingernails dragging across wood. Slow, deliberate. I heard it move around the entire cabin. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I finally worked up the courage to look outside. I pulled back the curtain near the kitchen window, and I swear to God, there was someone standing at the edge of the trees. Tall, unnaturally tall, at least 7 feet. Thin, its arms hung too low. I couldn't make out a face, only darkness, but I knew it was staring directly at me. The second my flashlight beam hit it, it stepped behind a tree and disappeared. I didn't sleep at all after that. At sunrise, I packed my stuff and decided I was leaving. I didn't care if I sounded crazy. I just wanted out. But when I walked outside, my car wouldn't start. Battery completely dead. I sat there trying over and over while panic started building in my chest. Then I noticed something on the windshield. Words, written in mud. Stay inside tonight. My stomach dropped. I looked around immediately. Nothing moved. Just trees swaying in the wind. I spent the next hour trying to get the engine running. Nothing worked. Finally, I remembered Evan mentioning another cabin about 3 miles away where an old groundskeeper supposedly stayed during hunting season. So I grabbed my backpack and started walking. The trail around the lake was muddy and narrow. Fog drifted through the trees. Every sound made me jump. About halfway there, I found footprints again. Bara footprints. Only this time, there were dozens of them, all around the trail, like someone had been circling the path repeatedly. I kept moving. Eventually, I saw smoke rising through the trees. Then I found a second cabin, except it wasn't occupied. The place looked abandoned, windows broken, door hanging open. I cautiously stepped inside. The smell hit me immediately. Old, animal rot. The interior was covered in strange symbols scratched into the walls. Most looked like circles with lines through them. Then I noticed photographs scattered across the floor. Old Polaroids, dozens of them. People standing near Black Pine Lake. Different years, different seasons. Every single photo had the same tall figure somewhere in the background, watching, sometimes near the trees, sometimes reflected in the lake, sometimes standing directly behind the people. My hands started shaking. Then I found a journal. The pages were water damaged, but I could still read parts of it. One entry said, "It only comes when you're alone." Another said, "Never answer the knocking." And then, "If you see it before midnight, leave immediately. If you hear it speak, it's already too late." I dropped the journal. That's when I heard movement upstairs. A floorboard creaked. Slowly, I looked toward the staircase. Another creak. Something was up there. I backed toward the door. Then I heard breathing. Heavy breathing. Right above me. I ran. I sprinted out of that cabin and through the woods as fast as I could. Branches tore my clothes. I could hear footsteps behind me the entire time. Not running. Walking. Slowly. Like it knew I couldn't escape. I finally reached my cabin near sunset. And that's when I realized something horrifying. The front door was open. I knew I'd locked it. Every light inside the cabin was on. I stood there frozen, staring. Then I heard the radio again. Static, followed by laughing. Low, distorted laughing. I should have kept running. Instead, I went inside. I don't know why. Maybe shock. Maybe panic. The cabin looked destroyed. Furniture overturned. Deep scratches covering the walls. And written across the living room floor in black mud were the words, "You let it see you." Then the radio voice spoke clearly. "Behind you." I turned, and for the first time, I saw it completely, standing in the hallway. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its skin looked gray and stretched tight across its body. Its eyes were completely black, and its mouth was far too wide. It smiled at me. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body locked up. Then it spoke, but the voice sounded wrong, like multiple voices talking together. "You stayed too long." I snapped out of it and swung the fireplace poker. The thing moved impossibly fast. 1 second it stood in the hallway. The next it was inches from my face. I smelled rotten meat. Then it screamed. Not a human scream. Something animal. Something ancient. I bolted for the door. The entire cabin shook behind me. I ran toward the lake because it was the only open area. I could hear it crashing through the trees behind me. And then I saw headlights. A truck. An older man driving toward the cabin road. I started screaming for help. The truck stopped. The driver jumped out and grabbed me. I kept yelling that something was chasing me. But when he shined his flashlight toward the woods, there was nothing there. No movement. No sound. Just darkness. The man introduced himself as Walter. He said he'd check the cabins every few weeks during hunting season. When I explained what happened, his expression changed immediately. He became very quiet. Then he asked me one question. "Did it talk to you?" I said yes. Walter just stared at me for a few seconds. Then he muttered, "That means it marked you." I asked him what the hell he was talking about. He wouldn't explain. He only told me to get in the truck. As we drove away, I looked back one final time, and I swear I saw something standing on the cabin roof, watching us leave. When we reached the highway, my phone suddenly regained signal. I called Evan immediately, but the moment I mentioned the cabin, he went silent. Then he admitted something. Years earlier, his uncle disappeared there. They never found him. The only thing police recovered was his truck parked near Black Pine Lake. And according to locals, several hikers had vanished around that area over the last 30 years. Most people blamed animals. Others blamed the lake itself. But locals had another story. Something lived in those woods. Something that hated being seen. I never went back. But the story doesn't end there. About 6 months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a Polaroid photo. It showed my cabin from that night. The lights were on, and standing in the front window was me. But behind me, that thing was smiling. The photo had one sentence written across the bottom. "It followed you home." I moved apartments 2 weeks later, and ever since then, strange things have happened. Footsteps outside my apartment at night. Scratching sounds near windows. My radio turning on by itself. Sometimes I wake up around 3 a.m. feeling like someone is standing in the corner of my room watching me. And once, just once, I saw a tall figure standing across the street outside my apartment. Perfectly still, waiting. Maybe stress made me hallucinate. Maybe trauma broke my brain. I honestly hope that's true, because if it isn't, then whatever lived near Black Pine Lake never really let me leave. And some nights, when the house gets quiet enough, I still hear knocking. 3 slow knocks,